John Kennedy buys a sandwich. At his own diner, stops cold when he hears two cashiers. John Neely Kennedy pulled his old pickup truck into the gravel lot of Kennedy's Kitchen, the diner he'd built from a dream and a prayer in the heart of Louisiana. The neon sign above the front door flickered faintly, its green and yellow glow casting a warm light against the late morning haze. The words Kennedy's Kitchen hummed with a quiet promise, a nod to the legacy of his family, a place meant to wrap folks in the comfort of good food and better company. But today, John wasn't here as the owner. He wasn't the man in the pressed shirt who signed checks or shook hands with suppliers. Today, he was just a guy in a faded denim jacket, a worn baseball cap tugged low over his brow and jeans with a small tear at the knee. His boots, scuffed from years of honest work, crunched against the gravel as he stepped out, his breath catching for a moment. He hadn't walked through that front door as a customer in years, not since the early days when the paint was still fresh, and every plate served felt like a personal victory. Lately, though, something had been gnawing at him. Whispers from regulars, a few stinging online reviews, and a quiet unease in his gut told him the diner wasn't what it used to be. The complaints didn't sound like his place. Slow service, cold attitudes, a vibe that felt more like a fast food joint than the warm embrace he'd envisioned. So he did what most bosses wouldn't. He left the office, the meetings, the spreadsheets, and decided to see the truth for himself. No one would recognize him like this, not the staff he paid every 2 weeks, not even the ones who'd been with him since the start. He glanced at the diner's weathered exterior, the windows streaked just enough to notice, and felt a pang of guilt. Had he been too hands-off, too trusting? He pushed the thought aside and stepped toward the door, the bell above it jingling softly as he entered. The smell hit him, first a wave of comfort that almost made him forget why he was here. Fried catfish, slow-simmered collard greens, and the sweet, buttery scent of cornbread fresh from the oven curled through the air. It was the kind of aroma that could hush a bad day, the kind that reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen, where the seeds of this diner were planted. She used to say food wasn't just fuel, it was love you could taste. Kennedy's Kitchen was supposed to carry that love, to be a place where folks felt seen, valued, no matter who they were or where they came from. But as John stepped into the lunch rush, the clatter of plates and the hum of conversation filling the room, he noticed something off. The energy wasn't right. No one looked up to greet him, not a nod, not a smile. The hostess stand was empty, a half-folded newspaper left abandoned on the counter. He joined the line at the register, blending in with the crowd, construction workers in dusty boots, a mom juggling a toddler, a man in a suit tapping his foot impatiently. John's eyes scanned the room, taking it all in. The booths were packed, servers darting between tables, but the rhythm felt chaotic, like a band playing out of tune. At the counter, 2 cashiers worked the registers. One, a lanky young man with short twists and a bored expression, was tapping away on his phone, barely glancing up. The other, a woman with dark hair pulled into a messy bun, chewed gum so loudly John could hear it over the country tune crackling through the speakers. Their name tags read Kendall and Marina. John recognized their names from payroll but couldn't place their faces. How long had it been since he'd really talked to his staff? He pushed the thought down as Marina called out, "Next!" Her voice flat, her eyes fixed on the register screen. John stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Can I get a catfish sandwich with a side of collards, please?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral, just another customer. Marina didn't look up, her fingers tapping the order into the system. "That it," she said, more statement than question. "Yeah, thanks," John replied, handing over a crumpled $10 bill. She took the cash, slid it into the drawer, and handed him a receipt without a word. John stepped aside to wait, leaning against the counter, his cap still low. That's when he heard it. Kendall, now tucking his phone into his pocket, leaned toward Marina with a smirk. "You see that guy?" he said, his voice low, but not low enough. "Another one of those walk-ins, probably off the street. Bet he don't tip." Marina snorted, popping her gum. "Yeah, ever since they started hiring from that outreach program, it's been a mess. Place is going downhill fast." John's jaw tightened, but he stayed still, his face hidden in the shadow of his cap. Outreach program. He'd pushed for that himself, a way to give folks a second chance. People who'd been overlooked or down on their luck. It was one of the things that made Kennedy's Kitchen different, or at least, it was supposed to. Marina kept going, her voice sharp with disdain. "They say the owner's some big shot never shows his face. Probably off in some fancy office counting his money while we're stuck here dealing with this." Kendall chuckled. "Bet he don't even know who's working for him." "Guy's a ghost." John stood frozen, the receipt crumpling slightly in his hand. They didn't know it was him standing 3 feet away. They didn't even suspect it. His first instinct was anger, a hot flare in his chest that made him want to rip off the cap and set them straight. But something heavier settled in, a cold weight of disappointment. This wasn't just about two cashiers mouthing off. This was his diner, his family's name glowing above the door, and it felt like a stranger's place. He glanced around, seeing the details he'd missed from behind his desk. A table with empty glasses untouched for too long. A young couple in a booth, craning their necks for a server who hadn't checked in. An older man by the window stirring his coffee with a frown, like he was wondering why he'd bothered coming. The laughter, the warmth, the sense of home John had poured into this place, it was gone, or at least it was fading. His grandmother wouldn't have recognized this. She'd have marched out of her kitchen apron still on and given everyone a talking to, customers included, until the place felt alive again. John didn't move toward the counter to pick up his order. Instead, he turned his boots quiet on the linoleum and walked toward the door. "Hey, you want your sandwich?" Kendall called after him, his tone half-hearted. "Cancel it," John said over his shoulder, his voice steady but clipped. "Not hungry anymore." The bell jingled as he stepped outside, the humid air hitting him like a wall. He didn't get back in his truck right away. Instead, he leaned against the hood, arms crossed, staring at the neon sign as if it could tell him where things went wrong. The words from the cashiers echoed in his head, not just what they said, but how they said it, so casual, so careless, like it was normal to talk that way. It wasn't just about him. It was the way they dismissed the new hires, the customers, the very idea of what this place was supposed to stand for. John had built Kennedy's Kitchen to be more than a diner. It was a promise, a place where people could walk in no matter their story and feel like they belonged. He'd hired folks others wouldn't given chances to, people who'd been written off because he knew what it was like to be counted out. Years ago, he'd been the one scraping by, dreaming of something bigger, and this diner was proof that dreams could grow if you worked hard enough. But now it felt like the soul of the place was slipping through his fingers, and he hadn't even noticed until today. He pulled his cap off, running a hand through his hair, and let out a long breath. The lunch rush was still in full swing inside the windows, showing flashes of movement, plates being set down, hands waving for refills. He could walk away, let it go, chalk it up to a bad day. But that wasn't who he was. Not then, not now. He needed to know more to see how deep this problem ran. This wasn't about firing anyone, not yet. It was about understanding what had happened to his diner and whether it could be saved. John walked a slow circle around the lot, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. He stopped at the edge of the building where the alley stretched toward the back. No cameras out here, just a dented steel door where the kitchen staff took their breaks. Above it, a small window was cracked open, letting out the clatter of pots and the low hum of voices. He stepped closer, staying out of sight, and listened. Inside, someone laughed a deep, warm sound that felt familiar. Reggie, the grill master, a man John had hired years ago after a recommendation from a local outreach program. Reggie had been in a rough spot back then, but he'd turned it around, becoming one of the diner's anchors. "I'm telling you," a younger voice cut through Kendall's unmistakable. "He ain't coming back. If he does, he'll probably roll in all high and mighty acting like he invented fried chicken." Marina's voice chimed in. "Yeah, Mr. Invisible. Got his name on the sign, but we're the ones keeping this place running." There was a pause, then Reggie's voice low and steady. "Y'all know he started this place with nothing but a grill and a handshake, right? Show some respect." Another pause, longer this time. Kendall scoffed. "Man, chill. If he don't care enough to show up, why should we?" John stepped back, his jaw tight. Reggie's words hit harder than the cashier's mockery. Someone still remembered what this place was supposed to be. But Kendall's question stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. Where had John been? When did he let meetings and paperwork pull him so far from the heart of his own diner? He didn't go back inside, not yet. Instead, he walked down the street to a gas station, grabbed a coffee he didn't drink, and sat on a bench across from the diner, watching. Customers came and went. A kid in a school uniform, an older woman with a cane, a delivery driver wiping sweat from his brow. This was his place, his people, and it was slipping away. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to the staff group chat team meeting tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Mandatory. No exceptions. He hit send, then tucked the phone away. Tomorrow wasn't about confrontation, not entirely. It was about listening, watching, and figuring out how to bring the soul of Kennedy's Kitchen back. He wasn't sure what he'd say when he faced them, but he knew one thing: he couldn't stay invisible anymore. The diner wasn't just a business. It was a promise, and he'd let it fray for too long. As the lunch crowd thinned and the neon sign buzzed above, John stood dusted off his jacket and headed to his truck. He wasn't done, not even close. John Neely Kennedy sat in his truck, the engine off the quiet of the Louisiana evening, settling around him like a heavy blanket. The neon glow of Kennedy's Kitchen flickered in the distance, its green and yellow light, a beacon that felt both familiar and foreign. His hands rested on the steering wheel, fingers tapping a slow, uneven rhythm as he replayed the day's events. The casual disdain in Kendall's voice, Marina's sharp laughter, the way they'd dismissed the diner's purpose and him without a second thought. It wasn't just their words that stung. It was how easily they'd said them, like it was routine, like the heart of the place had been hollowed out and no one had bothered to tell him. But Reggie's voice, low and steady, defending the diner's roots, had cut through the noise. That was the spark John needed, the reminder that not all was lost. He wasn't ready to walk back in, not yet. He needed to know more, to peel back the layers of what had gone wrong. So he stayed in the shadows, watching, listening, letting the diner reveal itself. He'd spent the afternoon away from the lot, driving aimlessly through the back roads, the hum of the tires on asphalt giving him space to think. Kennedy's Kitchen wasn't just a business to him. It was a piece of his soul, a promise to his grandmother's memory, to the community that had raised him. He'd built it to be a haven, a place where folks could sit down, share a plate, and feel like they mattered. But somewhere along the way, he'd stepped back too far, let the day-to-day slip into someone else's hands. Meetings with suppliers, bank loans, expansion plans, they'd pulled him away from the front lines. He'd trusted his team to carry the vision, but trust without presence was a recipe for drift. Kendall's words echoed in his mind. If he don't care enough to show up, why should we? It was a fair jab, one that landed harder than John wanted to admit. He'd been a ghost, and now the diner was paying the price. But he wasn't here to wallow. He was here to fix it. And that started with understanding the full scope of the problem. John stepped out of the truck, the gravel crunching under his boots as he made his way toward the alley behind the diner. The air was thick with the scent of grease and smoke, the kitchen's heartbeat spilling out through a cracked window above the back door. No cameras here, just a rusted dumpster and a couple of milk crates where the cooks took their breaks. He leaned against the brick wall out of sight and let the voices from inside wash over him. The clatter of pans, the hiss of the grill, the low hum of conversation, it was the diner's pulse, and he needed to feel it. Reggie's laugh broke through first, deep and warm, like a man who'd seen enough to know what mattered. "Y'all better watch yourselves," he said, his voice carrying through the window. "Talking like that's gonna bite you one day." Kendall's voice followed, sharp and dismissive. "Man, relax. Ain't nobody listening. The boss don't even know what's going on in his own kitchen." Marina chimed in, her tone lighter but no less cutting. "Yeah, Mr. Big Name. Probably off sipping sweet tea in some boardroom, leaving us to deal with the mess." John's jaw tightened, but he stayed still, his breath slow and measured. They didn't know he was there, didn't know he'd heard them earlier at the counter. But their words weren't new. They were just louder now, bolder, like they'd been saying this for months. Reggie's chair creaked, and his voice dropped firm, but not angry. "You two don't get it, do you? This place ain't just a paycheck." John started it with nothing but a skillet and a dream. Gave folks like me a shot when nobody else would. You're standing on his sweat, and you're out here mocking it. A long silence followed, broken only by the sizzle of something on the grill. Kendall scoffed, but it was weaker this time, less sure. "Whatever, Reggie. You act like he's some saint. If he cared, he'd be here, not us." Marina laughed, but it was half-hearted, like she was trying to keep up the act. John pressed his back against the wall, his cap low, his heart heavy. Reggie's defense was a lifeline, proof that the diner's soul wasn't entirely gone. But Kendall and Marina's carelessness was a mirror reflecting John's own absence. He'd hired good people, Reggie, Charisse, Tiana, but he'd left them to fend for themselves, assuming the diner's values would hold without him. His grandmother's words came back to him clear, as if she were standing there. "You can't build a house and walk away, John. It needs tending, or it falls apart." He'd built the house, but he'd forgotten to tend it. John stepped away from the wall, his boots quiet on the pavement. He wasn't angry anymore, not the way he'd been at the counter. This was something deeper, a mix of shame and resolve. He'd let the diner drift, but he could still steer it back. He walked to the gas station across the street, the same one he'd visited earlier, and grabbed another coffee he wouldn't drink. The clerk, a wiry man with a gray beard, nodded at him like they'd known each other forever. "Rough day?" the man asked, ringing up the cup. John gave a small smile. "Something like that." He paid and walked back to the bench outside, settling in to watch the diner from a distance. Customers trickled out, some laughing, some hurrying to their cars. A teenager in a hoodie lingered by the door, counting change in his palm before heading inside. A woman in a nurse's uniform sat alone at a booth by the window, her face tired but soft, like the food was her first moment of peace all day. This was why John had built the diner, not for profit, not for fame, but for moments like these. And yet the staff's attitude was poisoning it, turning a sanctuary into just another stop on the road. He pulled out his phone, the group chat still open from the message he'd sent earlier. Team meeting tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., mandatory. No exceptions. He stared at the screen, wondering what they'd thought when it came through. Kendall probably rolled his eyes. Marina might have complained to a coworker. Reggie would have nodded, maybe even smiled, knowing something was coming. John didn't plan to walk in guns blazing. He wasn't here to fire anyone, not yet. He needed to see their faces, hear their voices, understand who still believed in the diner and who was just punching a clock. He tucked the phone away and leaned back the bench, creaking under his weight. The diner's windows glowed, the lunch rush fading into the slower dinner crowd. He could go home, sleep it off, come back tomorrow with a clear head. But home felt too far, too disconnected from the problem at hand. Instead, he drove to a motel just outside town, a no-frills place with flickering lights and a vending machine that rattled like it was on its last legs. He checked in, dropped his bag on the bed, and pulled out a notepad. John sat at the small table by the window, the neon from the motel sign casting a red glow across the room. He scribbled down everything he'd seen and heard, the cashier's words, Reggie's defense, the customers' faces. He wrote about the diner's early days when he and a handful of staff worked 16-hour shifts, laughing through the chaos, serving plates with pride. He wrote about his grandmother, her hands always moving, her voice firm but kind, teaching him that a meal was only as good as the love behind it. He wrote until his hand cramped, until the notepad was a map of where things had gone wrong and what he needed to do next. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't about punishment. It was about truth, about laying the diner's soul bare and seeing who wanted to help rebuild it. John set the pen down, his coffee cold on the table. He didn't sleep much that night, but he didn't need to. His mind was alive, turning over every detail, every possibility. The diner wasn't lost, not yet. But saving it would take more than a single meeting. It would take showing up day after day until the promise he'd made when he hung that sign was real again. John Neely Kennedy stood outside Kennedy's kitchen, the morning sun casting long shadows across the gravel lot. His truck was parked at the far end, tucked between a delivery van and a beat-up sedan. But he wasn't hiding anymore. No denim jacket, no baseball cap pulled low. Today he wore a crisp button-down sleeves rolled to the elbows and jeans that fit like they belonged on the man who'd built this place. His boots, still scuffed, hit the ground with purpose as he crossed the lot, the weight of last night's sleepless hours fueling his resolve. The diner's neon sign was off, the green and yellow letters dim against the daylight, but the building itself felt alive, buzzing with the nervous energy of the staff gathering inside. John's group message, team meeting 9 a.m. Mandatory had rattled them, he was sure of it. He'd seen it in the way they arrived, one by one, some early, some dragging their feet. Reggie the grill master had been the first, unlocking the side door with the key John had given him years ago, his broad shoulders steady as ever. Charisse the cook, with a knack for perfect cornbread, followed, her apron already tied. Tiana, a server, who could charm a smile out of anyone, arrived with a thermos of coffee, her eyes curious but warm. Then came Marina, late, by 5 minutes, phone in hand, her steps hesitant. Kendall trailed behind, earbuds dangling, his usual smirk replaced by a tight-lipped frown. The rest, dishwashers, servers, a new line cook, filtered in their chatter, fading as the clock ticked closer to 9. John waited until 9:02, letting the moment settle, then opened the door and stepped inside. The bell jingled sharper in the quiet, and heads turned. The staff stood clustered near the front booths, some leaning against tables, others shifting awkwardly, unsure whether to sit or stand. The air was thick, not with the usual sense of bacon or coffee, but with anticipation, maybe even dread. John let the silence hang, his eyes scanning the room, meeting each pair of gazes one by one. Reggie gave a small nod, a flicker of respect in his eyes. Cherise's brows lifted, like she'd sensed something big was coming. Marina stared at her sneakers, her gum chewing absent for once. Kendall crossed his arms, his foot tapping a nervous rhythm. John cleared his throat, his voice steady but firm. "I won't keep y'all long, but I need you to listen. Really, listen." He paused, letting the words sink in. This place is called Kennedy's Kitchen for a reason. It's not just a name on a sign. It's a promise, a piece of my family, a place meant to lift people up. Customers, staff, anyone who walks through that door. My grandmother taught me that food isn't just food. It's a way to show people they matter. That's what this diner was built for. He stepped forward, his boots clicking on the linoleum. But yesterday I walked in here and didn't recognize it. The room shifted, a collective intake of breath. John's eyes flicked to Marina, then Kendall, but he didn't call them out. Not yet. "I came in dressed down, just another guy ordering a catfish sandwich. Stood right there," he said, pointing to the spot by the counter. "And I heard two employees talking about the owner, some guy who never shows up, who doesn't care, who's probably off counting his money. They talked about new hires like they were less than like this place was beneath them." The truth landed like a stone, heavy and unyielding. Marina's face flushed, her eyes still on the floor. Kendall's arms tightened across his chest, his jaw set. The rest of the staff exchanged glances, some confused, others piecing it together. "I heard it all." John continued, his voice calm but unwavering. "And I walked out without my sandwich, not because I was mad, but because I needed to understand how this place got so far from what it's supposed to be." He took a breath, his gaze softening as it landed on Reggie, then Cherise. "Some of y'all still carry the heart of this diner. You show up, you work hard, you make people feel welcome. I see that, and I'm grateful. But others..." He turned to the group, his eyes sweeping the room. "You've been clocking in, grabbing paychecks, and treating this place like it's just a job. That's not what Kennedy's Kitchen is. It's a home, or it's supposed to be. And I'm part of the problem. I stepped back, let things slide, assumed y'all would carry the vision without me. That's on me. But the disrespect, the carelessness, that's on you." The silence was absolute, the kind that makes you feel the weight of every word. Tiana raised her hand, her voice soft but clear. "Mr. Kennedy, I didn't know you were watching, but I'm glad you're here." John nodded. "I should have been here sooner. I let my absence turn into a story that wasn't true. But we're changing that, starting now." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his back pocket and held it up. "New rules, new expectations, but also new chances. Starting next week, we're doing monthly staff check-ins, real ones, not just quick chats in the hallway. I'll be here twice a week, minimum. You'll see my face, and we're bringing back customer feedback cards, not the online stuff, but real notes from the people in these booths. We're going to listen to them, and we're going to listen to each other." A murmur rippled through the room, not defiant, but alert, like the diner was waking up. Cherise spoke up, her voice steady. "About time. Folks been saying we need to tighten up." John gave her a small smile. "You're right. But here's the deal," he said, his tone hardening just enough. "If you don't want to be here, don't stay. Don't waste my time or this diner's purpose by pretending." If you can't bring respect for the customers, the food, the people you work with, there's the door. No hard feelings, but this isn't the place for you. He turned to Marina and Kendall, who stood frozen at the edge of the group. You two with me. He walked toward the back hallway near the pantry and held the door open without looking back. After a beat, they followed their steps, heavy. The door closed softly behind them, shutting out the hum of the dining room. John leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his voice low. I'm giving you a chance to speak. Tell me what this place means to you or doesn't. Kendall exhaled, his eyes darting to the side. Look, I just work here. It's a job you know. John's gaze didn't waver. Then you're in the wrong place. This diner isn't just a paycheck. It's a promise. Marina shifted, her arms folded. Okay, but you weren't around. We thought it didn't matter what we did. John nodded, his expression steady. Fair. I was gone too long, and I own that. But how does that justify talking about your co-workers like they're nothing or mocking the man who built this place? Marina looked down, her voice small. It doesn't. Kendall stayed quiet, his usual bravado gone. John straightened, his tone firm, but not cruel. I'm not firing you today. Not because you deserve to stay, but because I believe people can change. But you've got one shot to prove you belong here. Not with words, with how you treat people starting now. If you can't do that, walk away. He opened the door and stepped out, leaving them to decide. Back in the dining room, the mood had shifted. The staff weren't chatting or laughing, but they were focused, their eyes clear. John clapped his hands once. All right, we open in 30. Let's make this place feel like Kennedy's kitchen again. They scattered to their stations, the clink of plates and the hum of the grill filling the air. John moved to the coffee station, a notepad in hand, watching without hovering. The lunch rush would be the real test, but for now, he'd laid the foundation. The diner wasn't fixed, but it was awake, and that was a start. The lunch rush at Kennedy's kitchen hit like a Louisiana summer storm, fast and unrelenting. By noon, the line snaked toward the front door, a mix of regulars in work boots, families with restless kids, and first-timers clutching menus with curious eyes. The bell above the door jingled non-stop, its familiar chime cutting through the hum of conversation, the clatter of plates, and the sizzle of catfish on the grill. John Neely Kennedy stood near the coffee station, a notepad tucked under his arm. His presence quiet, but steady. He wasn't the undercover customer in a faded cap anymore, nor the absent boss he'd let himself become. Today, he was the anchor watching his diner come alive, testing whether the spark from this morning's meeting could hold. The air carried the warm, soul-soothing scents of collard greens, cornbread, and fried okra, but John's focus wasn't on the food. It was on the people, his staff, his customers, and the fragile pulse of the diner's soul which he'd vowed to revive. The morning had shifted something. The staff moved with purpose, not just going through the motions. Charisse worked the grill like an artist, flipping fillets with a rhythm that hadn't faltered in years. Reggie the grill master orchestrated the kitchen, his deep voice calling out orders with a calm authority that steadied the younger cooks. Tiana weaved between tables, her smile genuine, pausing to joke with a toddler or refill a glass before anyone asked. But at the registers where Marina and Kendall stood, the energy was less certain. Marina was trying, John could see it. She stood straighter, greeted customers with a hesitant smile, and said, "Thank you," like she meant it, though it felt rehearsed, like a new habit she hadn't quite settled into. Kendall, on the other hand, was a mixed bag. He took orders quickly, his fingers flying over the register, but his eyes avoided contact, and he slipped to the back whenever the line slowed. John jotted a note not out of judgment, but to track the pulse of the change he'd demanded. The diner wasn't just about serving food, it was about serving people, and that started at the front. Around 12:30, a young man walked in, his hoodie faded, his hands stuffed deep in his pockets. He was no older than 20, his eyes darting around like he was mapping exits. John watched from the coffee station unnoticed. The kid hesitated, then stepped to Marina's register. Can I get the catfish plate? But with okra instead of fries." His voice was soft, barely carrying over the diner's hum. Marina tapped the screen, her smile small but present. "Sure thing." "That it?" He nodded, fumbling with a crumpled bill. John caught Kendall glancing at the kid, then stepping back. His arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Marina handed over the receipt. "Orders up in 10. The kid mumbled a thanks and moved to a corner booth, clutching the slip like it was a lifeline. John's eyes narrowed. He recognized that look, not just nerves, but the weight of someone starting over. He'd seen it in Reggie years ago in Cherais, when she'd walked in fresh from culinary school with no one willing to give her a shot. This kid was from the outreach program. John was sure of it. He made a mental note to check the roster later. Reggie emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He spotted the kid, gave a single nod, and said, "You good, man?" It wasn't a question, just a quiet reassurance. The kid's shoulders relaxed, just a fraction. John felt a flicker of pride. Reggie got it, always had. He was the diner's backbone, not because he cooked the best ribs, though he did, but because he saw people, not just plates. Marina, though, had glanced away from the kid too quickly, her smile fading as soon as he stepped aside. Kendall hadn't engaged at all. John approached the counter, his voice low. "You know who that was?" Marina blinked, caught off guard. "No, should I?" John kept his tone even. "Name's Isaiah. Started with the outreach program last week. Came here on a recommendation. He's not here to cause trouble. He's here to eat, same as anyone." Marina's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Her eyes flicked to the kid's booth, and something shifted in her expression. Guilt, maybe, or the start of understanding. "He looked nervous," she said softly. John nodded. "Most folks do when they're trying to start fresh. Your job's to make 'em feel welcome, not invisible." She nodded, her face serious. "I get it. I'll do better." The shift rolled on, and the diner found its rhythm. Tiana's tables laughed louder, her warmth spreading like sunlight. Cherise slipped a plate of peach cobbler to a regular winking as she dusted it with cinnamon. Reggie handed Isaiah's order to him personally, adding a fist bump that drew a shy smile from the kid. By mid-afternoon, the tip jar was heavier, the kitchen spotless, and customers lingered, their conversation stretching past empty plates. John stayed by the coffee station, his notepad filling with observations, not just of what needed fixing, but of what was working. The diner wasn't perfect, but it was breathing again. As the rush slowed, Kendall approached, wiping his hands on a rag. He looked uneasy, his usual swagger gone. "I messed up yesterday," he said, his voice low. "Didn't realize how it sounded." John studied him, his expression neutral. "It wasn't just loud, Kendall. It was wrong. You dismissed this place, the people in it." Kendall nodded, his eyes on the floor. "I know. I don't want to lose this job. I'll step up." John gave a short nod. "Second chances come with a catch. You gotta earn 'em. Show me you mean it." Kendall straightened, a faint grin breaking through. "I will." By closing time, the diner felt different, not louder or busier, but right. John sat in a booth by the window, a cup of coffee untouched in front of him. Marina approached, her apron folded under her arm. She slid into the seat across from him, her face tired but open. "I think I need to go," she said quietly. John leaned back, his eyes steady. You sure? She nodded her fingers, twisting the edge of her apron. This place, it's more than I thought. It's about purpose, not just a paycheck. I don't think I'm built for that. Not yet. John didn't argue. Thank you for being honest. You handled today better than I expected. That's something. She gave a faint smile, stood, and left her apron on the table, walking out with a nod. John watched her go, not angry, not relieved, just certain she'd made the right call. The next morning, John was back before dawn, the diner still dark, the air cool and quiet. He stood in the kitchen, a photo of his grandmother pinned to the corkboard above the prep table. Her arms crossed, her smile tough but kind, the woman who'd taught him what a meal could mean. He whispered, "We're getting there, Grandma." By 8, the staff gathered again, no surprise this time, just to check in before breakfast. The mood was lighter, looser. John stepped forward, his voice clear. "Yesterday was a start. Y'all showed me what this place can be when we try. But one day doesn't fix everything. It just shows who's willing to show up." He held up 2 folders. This one's for those who want to stay, who believe in what Kennedy's Kitchen stands for, and are ready to bring heart to it. This one's for anyone who wants out. No questions, 2 weeks' pay, and a recommendation. You've got until tonight to decide. He set the folders on the counter and stepped back. Reggie was the first to sign the stay folder, his grin quiet but sure. This place gave me a shot. I'm not going anywhere. Charisse and Tiana followed, then others one by one. Kendall signed, last, his hand steady, his eyes meeting John's for the first time all week. By week's end, Kennedy's Kitchen was humming. The bell rang with purpose, the register clicked with rhythm, and the kitchen sang with motion. Customers noticed. A man in a suit, clearly out of town, came in stiff, but left with a takeout bag and a smile, thanks to Tiana's charm. Isaiah returned his hoodie off, his posture straighter, sharing a laugh with Reggie over a plate of ribs. Word spread not online, but the old way through people. A teacher told her friend, a mechanic told his crew, and the diner became a destination again. One afternoon, Charisse slid John a plate of peach cobbler, her grandmother's recipe with a brown sugar crust. "Taste it," she said, proud. He took a bite, the sweetness hitting like a memory. "That's the one," he said. She'd be proud. Later, a customer left a note on a napkin slipped under a glass. "Been coming here since you opened. Thought it lost its spark. Today it felt like home again. Thank you." John folded it, tucked it in his pocket, and stood by the window, watching the neon sign flicker. The lesson wasn't just for the staff. It was for John, for anyone who builds something and thinks it can stand alone. Leadership isn't a title or a paycheck. It's showing up day after day to tend the soul of what you've created. Culture doesn't thrive on autopilot. It needs care, accountability, and presence. John had learned that the hard way, but he'd also seen what happens when people choose to grow. Kendall was proof, still rough around the edges, but trying his greetings warmer, his work sharper. Marina's departure was proof, too, that sometimes stepping away is the honest choice. The diner taught John that second chances matter, but only when they're earned, and that respect for customers, co-workers, the purpose behind the work, is the foundation of any place worth building. For those listening, the story's message is clear. Don't let what you love drift. Show up for it. Listen to it. Fix it when it's broken, not with anger, but with heart. And never assume the work is done, because the soul of a place, like the soul of a person, needs constant tending to shine.